And honestly, I would still come to the Valley. I think that, all of this is much ado about nothing in many ways. I just think that people are spending an enormous amount of time, you know, talking about where they're going to zoom into meetings of engineers in Silicon Valley from. Uh, so I just think the whole thing's a fucking joke. It's not. This is all window dressing. Look, at the end of the day, this has been the heartbeat. It will change over time. Um, but I remember the first day I got here, as a kid from Canada, and I was in Silicon Valley for the first time, and I was like, wow, I'm here. This is it. And I've told this story before, but I was driving on the 101. This is right before the 101 highway. This is right before the internet bubble burst, and Forbes had bought a huge ad as soon as you entered Menlo Park that said high octane capitalism ahead. It's the craziest things you remember 20 some odd years later. But this is the place. The people are incredibly special. I think San Francisco may have lost its way a little bit, but people in the valley have always been kind of grinding on interesting things. The other, there'll always be other places to go, but I wouldn't worry about that decision. I would just try to get here, find some interesting people, work at an interesting company, learn, and then take some risk. But I wouldn't be running to some of these places just because you're going to be one of the very few, and you're almost there to prove a point, which I just think misses the mark.
Yeah, I would agree completely with Chamath. In fact, it was in 2005 or so that Larry Ellison said innovation is dead. I don't know how many people remember that. And so when Oracle decided to move its headquarters from Silicon Valley, my tweet was, I'm glad to see it because it makes room for newer, younger, more innovative minds than an old ossified company like Oracle. So we do need to make room for newer people, and I'm sort of glad the phenomena is happening. It makes room for all of you to come here. Look, most of the learning you do will be from friends, from acquaintances, from company. It won't be formal meetings over Zoom. It'll be the community you live in, the talks you can go to, the Stanford professor or whoever you can listen to, or the entrepreneur. And that activity is still in the Valley more so than other places. I like to say Silicon Valley isn't a place, but it's a culture. It's a permissive culture. And it's a culture where if you're a senior executive at a big company, it's generally a bad thing. And if you're a young, scrappy entrepreneur, it's a good thing, socially speaking. And that culture can be duplicated in other places and starting to happen. Israel has some of that. I've noticed some of it around Toronto and Waterloo. You see it in Bangalore a little bit, Shanghai a little bit. So it will happen, and I think the world will be a better place if more of this happens in other places. But Silicon Valley is still the place where you get the most. And if I were young, this is where I'd want to come. Like I wanted to come here, 40 some years ago.
Awesome. Okay. So